On a freezing winter night, as snow swallowed the city and silence pressed against the glass of a luxury SUV, a powerful CEO thought he had seen it all. But then, through the blur of the storm, he noticed something small and fragile on the sidewalk. A little girl, barefoot in the snow, clutching a torn paper bag to her chest. When she lifted her head and whispered, "It's my mom's medicine," everything inside him stopped. In that fragile moment, the man who lived only for business and power was about to discover something far greater than success. A choice was waiting: to look away, or to step into the storm and change not only her life, but his own forever. Stay with us, and if stories like this move your heart, subscribe to Hidden Echo Stories. Because the most powerful tales are the ones that remind us we are never truly alone. The storm had swallowed the city whole. Minneapolis looked like it had been erased under layers of ice and snow. The streets blurred into a white emptiness where even traffic lights glowed faintly, like dying embers behind a curtain. Wind clawed through the cracks in doors and windows, sharp enough to sting through gloves, filling the night with a merciless howl. To most, it was just another brutal winter evening. To one man inside a sleek black SUV, it was another backdrop to his endless silence. Caleb Whitmore, a man whose name had been printed on magazine covers and corporate billboards, sat rigid in the back seat. His suit was immaculate, his coat folded neatly beside him, his phone buzzing with reminders he refused to answer. At 45, he was the kind of man strangers admired from a distance, but no one really knew up close. His reflection in the tinted glass startled him, though he did not flinch. The sharp jawline, the well-kept hair, the perfect suit, all markers of control, wealth, and precision. Yet behind the eyes there was nothing. A hollow echo of someone who had built an empire but lost himself somewhere in the scaffolding. The gala awaited him, another stage for his carefully crafted persona, another evening of shaking hands and reciting lines about progress, partnerships, innovation. His driver kept the SUV crawling forward through the storm, high beams piercing only a few feet into the swirling white. Caleb rubbed at his brow, already calculating speeches and public perception scores, when something on the side of the road caught his eye. At first it looked like debris, a pile of discarded rags against the curb, but then it shifted. His gaze sharpened. A child, a tiny figure hunched over, clutching something to her chest. Her coat was too thin, filthy, with one button missing, leaving her chest bare to the storm. She was barefoot, her knees drawn in tightly, as if her small body could hold itself together against the cold. Caleb told himself what he had always told himself in these moments of unease: do not get involved. There are always explanations. A parent nearby, a shelter around the corner, someone else will handle it. He turned his head away. But before the instinct could harden, the child lifted her face. Her lips moved. Through the thick glass of the car, he could almost hear it, soft, brittle, like it came from another world. "Please, it's my mom's medicine." The words pierced him sharper than the storm outside. The air in the SUV shifted, pressing down on him until his chest felt crushed. His jaw tightened, and for the first time in years, his voice cracked with urgency. "Stop the car." The driver did not hear him. "Stop," he snapped louder. The brakes screeched, and before the vehicle even fully halted, Caleb pushed the door open. The blizzard hit him like a slap, slicing through his polished exterior in seconds. Snowflakes seared his skin, the cold sinking into his bones, but none of that mattered. What held him there, suspended in the storm, were the girl's eyes, wide, glassy, on the brink of closing forever. He stumbled forward, kneeling into the snow. The wool of his tailored pants soaked instantly, but he did not notice. The girl was trembling violently, her lips blue, her breath shallow. Her fragile fingers clung to a paper bag torn at the edges, damp and fragile. Inside, he glimpsed a box of insulin. Caleb's heart stuttered, a small body trying to fight the storm, not for herself but for someone else. He pulled off his heavy coat and wrapped it around her. She weighed almost nothing in his arms, frighteningly light, every rib sharp under his touch. She coughed, a sound that clawed at him and then went limp. Panic surged through him. He carried her back to the SUV, barking at the driver to head for the nearest hospital. His voice carried no trace of boardroom polish, no carefully measured authority. It was raw, urgent, desperate. In the back seat with the heater blasting, he cradled her small body against his chest, whispering assurances he wasn't sure he believed. "You're going to be all right. Stay with me. Just stay with me." Her eyelashes were frosted with ice, freckles dotted across her pale cheeks. Even unconscious, her tiny hand clutched the bag, refusing to let go of the medicine meant for her mother. Caleb felt his own hands tremble, not from the cold but from something deeper, something that terrified him more than he could name. At the hospital, he burst through the sliding glass doors, his voice echoing down sterile hallways as he shouted for help. Nurses swept her away, attaching wires, masks, and monitors, while Caleb stood frozen, drenched in melting snow, his heart pounding in ways it hadn't in years. When a nurse asked if he was her father, he whispered the truth. No, just a stranger. But even as he said it, the word felt wrong. The girl's name was Maddie. He overheard it as staff rushed to stabilize her. She looked impossibly small on the hospital bed, dwarfed by wires and machines. A doctor explained that she was suffering from hypothermia, dehydration, and exhaustion, but she was stable for now. Caleb barely heard the words. His eyes had fixed on the soaked paper bag the nurse handed him. Inside was the insulin, a half-crushed sandwich, and a note scribbled in shaky handwriting. "For Mom, don't drop it." The message struck him like a hammer. This child had fought the storm not for herself, but for her mother. She had been willing to freeze in the snow to deliver that medicine. And he, a man who had spent years measuring life in profits and losses, now sat trembling with a fragile bag in his hands, realizing what true purpose might mean. As hours stretched, Caleb did not leave her side. He sat in the waiting chair, wet clothes clinging, phone silenced as if his world outside no longer existed. For the first time in years, silence wasn't about strategy or control. It was just silence. And in that silence, something inside him cracked open. The fluorescent lights of St. Clair's Hospital hummed faintly, casting everything in a pale, sterile glow. Caleb sat outside the trauma room, his elbows braced on his knees, his coat gone, his shirt clinging damply to his back. He was still shivering, though it was not from the winter storm. His eyes stayed fixed on the glass where Maddie lay swaddled in warming blankets, her tiny body hooked up to machines that beeped steadily, almost like a fragile heartbeat borrowed from somewhere else. She looked so small against the vast white sheets, her lips tinged with blue, her chest rising in shallow rhythm. The doctor, Dr. Ellen Harding, was calm, efficient, not wasting words. She spoke of mild hypothermia, exhaustion, dehydration, perhaps malnourishment. Maddie was stable for now, but fragile. Caleb nodded at her words, though they blurred together. His gaze kept sliding back to the girl. He barely noticed the nurse handing him the soggy paper bag, its edges falling apart in his hands. Inside, he found the vial of insulin, a sandwich pressed flat, and a note in a child's shaky scrawl. "For Mom. Don't drop it." Something inside him twisted hard. That simple note spoke louder than any quarterly report he had ever signed. It was survival written in a child's hand, love wrapped in a paper bag. His throat tightened until he could not swallow. Hours passed. Caleb refused to leave. His phone buzzed over and over until finally he held down the button and powered it off, the screen fading to black. He realized, almost with surprise, that it was the first time in years he had chosen silence over obligation. When at last Maddie stirred awake, her voice was a rasp. "Where's my mom?" Her eyes searched the room with desperate clarity. Caleb leaned forward. "She is not here yet, but we are going to find her," he promised. She turned away into the pillow, tears dampening the sheet, whispering about failing her mother. He shook his head firmly, telling her she was brave, that she had done what few adults would dare. The doctor listened quietly, saying nothing, but gave him a look that acknowledged the weight of his words. By the next day, Caleb carried the address Maddie had whispered, an old basement apartment on Humboldt. The SUV rolled down an alley littered with ice and rusted trash cans. The door was ajar when he arrived, the stench of mold and sickness clinging to the air. He found Jenna, Maddie's mother curled weakly on the couch, her skin pale, sweat shining across her forehead. She barely stirred when he touched her shoulder. The insulin had never reached her. Caleb's instincts sharpened with precision. He called his private physician, ordering a crash kit and immediate transfer to North Point's medical center, no hesitation, no cost spared. As his team arrived, taking vitals, administering fluids, Caleb stood in the dim apartment and looked around. Crayon drawings on the fridge, a single bed with a patchwork quilt, cupboards nearly bare. It was survival by threads, a world far from the polished glass of his corporate towers. An elderly neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell, appeared with groceries, confirming what he already sensed. Jenna had been sick, jobless, let go without insurance, abandoned by the system. Caleb listened, his chest heavy with the knowledge that his own corporate signatures may have played a role. The hospital where Jenna once worked had been downsized under a merger. He could not remember the faces, the files, but suddenly one stood before him in flesh and bone, collapsing under the weight of his choices. That night, Jenna was moved into a private recovery suite at North Point, receiving care she should have had weeks earlier. Caleb arranged for Maddie to be transferred as well so she could be near her mother. When Maddie learned her mom was safe, her eyes filled with relief, though doubt lingered like a shadow. She asked softly if her mother would be angry at her for failing. Caleb knelt beside her bed and assured her it was not failure, it was love. She had carried hope through a storm, and that was more than most would ever attempt. Over the following days, Caleb became a constant presence. He brought small things for Maddie, coloring books, warm socks, cocoa from the hospital cafeteria. He read aloud from old storybooks he had not touched since his sister's illness years ago, his voice rusty but steady. Nurses began waving at him like he belonged. Volunteers mistook him for a father. Maddie never asked why he stayed. She simply accepted it, curling up with her patched teddy bear, filling her room with drawings taped across the walls. Many of them included three figures: a girl, a woman, and a tall man with glasses and square shoulders. Caleb saw himself in those drawings and felt something inside crack open further. He remembered his sister Claire, remembered watching her fade despite all the money he had thrown at the disease. Back then, he could not save her. But this time, he whispered to himself, things would be different. He could not walk away. And yet shadows loomed. One evening, Maddie looked at him with clear, unblinking eyes and asked the question that sliced through him like ice. "Are you the one who made my mom lose her job?" He could not answer right away. His empire had been built on contracts and acquisitions, decisions signed without faces attached. It was possible. Finally, he spoke the truth he could manage. "I don't know, but I promise you this, I will make sure she never loses anything else." She nodded faintly, and in that small gesture he felt something like permission to stay. For Caleb, it was no longer about charity or guilt. It was about connection, about mending what had been broken, even if he had been the one to break it unknowingly. It was about presence, about showing up when no one else did. In those quiet hours, as snow continued to fall outside, a man who had once lived only for power found himself transformed by the fragile trust of a little girl. He was no longer calculating brand reputation or profit margins. He was holding onto something far rarer, the fragile thread of belonging. The storm had quieted, leaving the city coated in slush and silence, but the real storm was only beginning. Caleb had barely adjusted to being a steady presence in Maddie's world when the past came crashing through the hospital doors in the form of a man who had left long ago. Travis Monroe, Maddie's biological father, appeared not with tenderness but with legal papers. He wanted custody. Timing was cruel. Jenna was still recovering, fragile but stronger each day. Maddie was just beginning to feel safe again, and suddenly a man who had not been there in years claimed a right to take her away. Caleb's chest burned when he first heard the news from Dana, the social worker. Travis had not paid support, had not visited, had not even called. Yet now, with attention swirling around Maddie's story, he surfaced like a shadow with polished shoes and a smirk that looked more like ambition than love. The courthouse was a world away from the hospital's warm lights. Its hallways smelled of dust and paperwork, the benches cold and narrow. Caleb had been in boardrooms where billions were on the line, in Senate hearings where policy bent under his voice, but he had never felt this particular brand of pressure. His hands clasped tighter than any negotiation, his throat dry, his chest tight with a quiet panic he did not know how to shake. Jenna sat a few benches away, her blazer neat but her fingers trembling as she twisted the fabric at the hem. Maddie sat beside Caleb, her patched teddy bear hugged tightly to her chest, her small legs swinging nervously off the edge of the bench. Across the hall, Travis leaned casually against the wall, scrolling on his phone as though this was just another meeting to win. Inside the courtroom, Judge Harper presided with a calm that cut through the charged atmosphere. Travis's lawyer painted him as a concerned father returning at the right time, but when asked simple questions, her pediatrician's name, her allergies, her daily routine, Travis stumbled. He knew none of it. His claims of love were hollow in the face of his absence. Then came Monica Raines, Jenna's attorney, her voice steady as steel. She acknowledged that Caleb was not Maddie's father, not even family by blood, but pointed out what he had been in 3 short weeks. He had sat with her through fevers, nightmares, coloring books, and cocoa. He had paid for her mother's treatment and whispered reassurances when storms rattled the windows. He had stayed, and that word carried more weight than any legal title. When Jenna spoke, her voice cracked but held steady. "He was the only one who did not run," she told the judge. "Not when I was sick, not when Maddie was lost in the snow, not even when Travis appeared again. He stayed." And then Maddie herself was brought forward. She walked slowly, clutching her bear like a shield, her small voice rising in the quiet courtroom. When asked who Caleb was to her, she answered simply, "He is the one who stayed. He did not leave when I got sick, when Mom was sick, when it snowed. He is my Caleb." The room fell silent. The next morning, Judge Harper delivered the ruling. Jenna retained full custody, as was right. Travis's petition was dismissed due to his years of absence. But in an unexpected decision, the court granted Caleb legal guardianship in emergencies and full visitation rights with Maddie. It was not a title Caleb had sought, but when Maddie ran into his arms afterward, whispering, "You did not let them take me," he knew it meant more than any business victory he had ever claimed. In the weeks that followed, life took on a different rhythm. Jenna grew stronger each day, her health returning under proper care. Maddie's laughter filled the hospital rooms, then the small apartment where she returned, then finally a modest cedar cabin outside the city where snow dusted the hills. Caleb was no longer a visitor. He was a fixture. He came not with grand gestures but with simple presence, reading a bedtime story, repairing a torn scarf, listening when Maddie's fears surfaced at night. Christmas morning dawned quietly, light spilling across the wooden floors of the cabin. Maddie sat cross-legged among gifts, but the present she cherished most was a simple ornament she had crafted with help from an art therapist. Inside the glass sphere was a drawing of 3 figures, a girl, her mother, and a man with square shoulders. Above them were words written in red crayon, "Mom, me, Caleb." When she hung it on the tree with both Jenna and Caleb at her side, she whispered, "We do not have to wish for family anymore. We built one." Caleb's throat tightened, Jenna's hand brushed his, and for the first time in years he felt what home truly meant. It was never about wealth or titles or control. It was about presence. It was about showing up and staying when no one else would. And as the snow fell softly outside, a man who had once believed he was destined to live alone in silence realized he had been given something greater than empire. A family stitched together by choice, by resilience, by love. There are moments in life that arrive like whispers, so quiet that they could almost be missed, yet powerful enough to shift the course of everything that follows. For Caleb, it was not the applause at a gala, not the weight of another contract signed, not the echo of power in polished boardrooms. It was a little girl, trembling in the snow, holding a fragile paper bag with her mother's lifeline inside. In her small voice and in her unyielding determination, he found a mirror. He saw not weakness, but a love so fierce it was willing to fight a storm. In rescuing her, he thought he was saving a child, But the truth was far deeper. She was saving him. She pulled him back from the hollow silence of his own life and reminded him what it meant to be present, what it meant to stay when it mattered. Maddie did not need a millionaire. She did not need polished speeches or grand gestures. She needed someone who would not leave, someone who would hold her hand through fear and uncertainty. And in choosing to be that person, Caleb discovered that love is not built on bloodlines or titles but on presence, on showing up again and again when storms rage. Jenna, too, found strength in that presence. Together, they pieced back the fragile threads of a life that had nearly unraveled. It was not a miracle delivered from the sky, but a miracle built step by step, through persistence, compassion, and the willingness to see another human being as more than a problem to solve. In that, Caleb's world shifted forever. This story reminds us all that family is not always what we are born into. It can be what we choose to build. It is not measured by the grandeur of a house or the number of zeros in a bank account. It is measured by the quiet moments. A teddy bear patched with love, cocoa shared on a cold night, drawings taped to a hospital wall. These are the threads that weave a true home. If this story has touched your heart, let it be a reminder that love often appears in the most unexpected places, sometimes disguised as a plea whispered in the snow. And if you believe in stories that heal, that restore, that remind us of the beauty hidden in the hardest days, we invite you to stay with us. Subscribe to Hidden Echo Stories, because somewhere out there, another tale is waiting. A tale that may change not just how you see the world, but how you choose to live in it.